Numerous studies indicate that on Christmas, the day after Christmas, and New Year's Eve, there are more deaths than any other time of the year. Data shows that the increase in deaths is true for all demographic groups except children. Numerous theories offer a variety of explanations as to why this is the case. Stress, alcohol consumption, cardiac disease, automobile accidents, staffing shortages among medical personnel. For all settings combined, there are holiday spikes for almost every major disease group. In the 2 weeks starting with Christmas, there is an excess of 42,325 deaths from natural causes, above and beyond the expected winter increase. But really, we only have guesses as to what precisely these risk factors are and why this phenomenon seems to repeat year after year. This year was no exception. In the midst of our celebrations of light, we learned about a few notable deaths that final week in December: Greg Gumbel, Olivia Hussey, Linda Lavin, President Jimmy Carter. Our own Torah cycle seems to mirror real life, as this week we conclude the book of Genesis with the portion known as Vayechi, meaning, and he lived. And yet, much like Chaye Sarah, the portion we read several weeks ago, which is translated as the life of Sarah, in this case too, we don't speak so much about the lives, but rather about the deaths of our biblical ancestors. This week, we read of the deaths of our patriarchs, Jacob and Joseph. Like President Carter, who died on December 29th at 100 years old, Jacob and Joseph lived long lives. According to the Torah, Jacob died at 147 years old. Joseph lived until he was 110. While we do not know precisely how 1 year was defined in the biblical world, what matters is that this week we reach the end of our first act of Jewish sacred history and prepare for the second act that will begin next week with Moses in the second book of the Torah, Exodus. Jacob's death in Egypt was followed by the most prominent funeral and procession in recorded history. Jacob this week is accompanied by the leaders of Egypt and the Egyptian cavalry back to the Holy Land, where he is laid to rest next to Abraham and Isaac in the cave of Machpelah, what is today in the city of Hebron. 54 years later, Joseph dies in Egypt too, but his body will remain there for many years and only be taken out of Egypt when the Israelites are freed from slavery in the Exodus. It is no mistake that this week's portion is called Vayechi, and he lived. For even in the shadow of death, we are all called to focus on life and living. Following the great Egyptian funeral for Jacob, or the fact that Joseph remained in Egypt for decades until the Jewish people left Egypt, what we remember about them and about our loved ones is Vayechi, how they lived their lives, the ways in which they lived and loved and faced challenges, knowing as we do that it is up to us to make the most of our days and years here on earth. Nachmanides, the great rabbinic scholar, writes, "Everything that happened to the patriarchs is a signpost for their children. This is why the Torah elaborates its account of all of their journeys and all of the events of their lives. These all come as instruction for the future, for us. For when something happens to one of these three patriarchs, one understands from it what is decreed to occur to us. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, used this principle to teach us a lesson based on Jacob's life. He said that Jacob's life of 147 years can be divided into three parts. One, the first 77 years of his life were spent in the Holy Land, safe and in the tents of study. Two, these were followed by 20 years in Haran, where he worked tirelessly and began his family. Finally, three, Jacob descended to Egypt, where he lived his final 17 years. The Rebbe beautifully characterizes these three phases in the following way. In the first, most of Jacob's life was tranquil and quiet. Jacob studied, prayed, and served God and his community. He had no real-world concerns or worries. During the second phase of his life, he faced formidable struggles and obstacles in Haran. He worked tirelessly there for 20 years and was taunted and deceived by his father-in-law-to-be, Laban. And three, Jacob's final 17 years in Egypt were spent in true exile. He lived in a state of subjugation to a pharaoh and to Egyptian ways that were completely unknown to him. A stranger in a strange land, he was forced to adopt customs that ran counter to his Jewish upbringing. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says these three phases of Jacob's life encompassed sovereignty, struggle, and subjugation. And according to Nachmanides, so it is with us. We have all felt on top of the world, large and in charge, like nothing could take us down from our position of sovereignty or control over our realm. So too have we all endured moments of struggle when we were vulnerable to inner and outer forces that threatened to topple us. Sometimes we have been in unfamiliar territory, subjugated to authorities we did not know, feeling like a stranger in a strange land. Jacob inspires us to enjoy the moments of tranquility, to keep at it when we face struggles, and to live according to our true and authentic selves, even when the world around us seems foreign and unfriendly. Ultimately, these moments of our lives pass, and whatever the era or epoch, it is up to us to use our lives to find meaning and purpose, no matter what the phase. Like our biblical ancestors, the journey will not be smooth, but we press on, learning that living lives of integrity and honesty does matter. In the final analysis, we are measured by how we navigate our ups and downs, and we are remembered by the quality of our time on earth and for the positive differences we make in the lives of others. On this Shabbat Vayichi, as we honor those who truly lived, I conclude with this poem by Linda Ellis called The Dash. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the headstone from the beginning to the end. He noted first came the date of the birth, and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most was the dash between the years. For that dash represents all the time they spent on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is really worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, even the cash. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand how other people feel. Be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, will you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Shabbat Shalom.